Many years ago, in the land of Sutherland, there lived a young man who owned a wild dog. The animal would growl and bark at anyone who was not his master. Because of this, the man would often walk his dog near the loch that sits on the south side of Ben's Stack. Here he could let the dog run free without worry, as no one from the village ever came out that way. It was on one of these excursions the young man came upon a beautiful woman, washing her clothes by the loch side. She had bright, flame-red hair, and wore a graceful, long green dress. She looked at the man with her bewitching eyes, and beckoned him to come forth. In a near dreamlike state, the man approached the temptress. In the blink of an eye, the once beguiling figure was no more, and in its place stood a hideous, scale-covered beast with long, sharp claws. Before the man could scream, the beast grabbed hold of him and began to pull his body into the cold loch. Struggle as he might, the man had not the power nor the strength to free himself. It was then that the sharp teeth of his beloved companion sank painfully into the scaly arm of the beast. With an inhuman howl, the dark creature released the man and began grappling with the wild animal. The dog ripped and tore flesh from the hideous creature, which fought back with equal ferocity. As the water in the loch turned red, both creatures collapsed and their bodies sunk into the murky black depths. The young man ran from the scene, lamenting the loss of his companion, but grateful to have survived. On his return to the village, the man told of his encounter with the nightmarish beast. It was only then the creature was given a name. An elderly man with a quiet voice spoke up. "It would seem you have met the Fuath." The Fuath is an incredibly odd creature from Scottish folklore, as it has no defined form or appearance. Fuath literally means hatred, and the term is frequently used when referring to any nondescript evil creature or spirit. Some suggest that there were many subspecies or close relations to the Fuath, such as the shellycoat, the bogle, some urisk, and possibly even the dreaded nucklevee. This makes it very difficult to give a general summary or history of the creature. What is known is that the Fuath are shapeshifters and beings of evil. Their intent is almost always malicious, and it would seem that these dark creatures are sustained by the flesh of humans. They will use their great power to lure, trick, or enthrall, and when their prey is at its most vulnerable, the Fuath will attack. The nature and appearance of the Fuath is a hotly debated subject in the realms of Scottish folklore. John Francis Campbell, a well-known authority on Celtic folklore, suggests that the Fuath refers to a class of malevolent water spirits, similar in many ways to the Kelpie. They dwell within the lochs, rivers and seas that lie throughout Scotland. The Fuath commonly appear as green scaled humanoids, but have the mane and tail of a horse. J.F. Campbell also claims that the Fuath cannot smell, as they possess no nose, and rely solely on their keen eyesight when hunting prey. Another Campbell, namely John Grigerson Campbell, the renowned Scottish folklorist, disagrees almost entirely with his namesake. Grigerson believes that the Fuath is not necessarily of aqueous nature or habitat, and points to many tales of the beast appearing inland or atop the hills, far from water. He also suggests that the creature is more metaphysical in nature. It exists as a form of dark energy beyond human perception. Yet, if the entity chooses, it can manifest itself in any form it wishes. Grigerson is firm in his belief that the Fuath commonly takes the forms of young men or young women, with the aim to entice and enchant the opposite sex. When the unsuspecting victim is within the spirit's grasp, it will briefly reveal a bestial form while it devours its prey. This form is said to be more alien and goblin-like than the equine description of J.F. Campbell. The debate still continues to this day, so currently there is no specific description or habitat for the Fuath. Other researchers have suggested the Fuath is a mistreated fairy or she, and that this may explain its vengeful and spiteful essence. Some even think of the beast as a spirit of nature that would hunt and punish humans for their transgressions against the natural world. In the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, it was believed that if you caught and killed fish during the spawning season, that you would be cursed and hunted by the Fuath. The same is true of those that burn forests or hunted for sport. This form of spiritual justice can be seen in the tale of the poachers and the Fuath. Once, many years ago, there lived two young men from the village of Inveran, named John and Ian. The pair had the terrible habit of poaching fish from the local river. Each night, the pair, along with their trusty dog, would sneak out of the village and travel to the river Shin. There they secured a small net with which they would span the river. When the fishing was done, John would cast a weighted line across the river and Ian would haul it up, closing the net and capturing the fresh salmon. But one of these evenings was to change their lives forever. It was a dark and cold night, and a heavy mist had rolled in. Knowing the weather would obscure their actions, there was no finer time for the men to catch some fish. They quickly uncovered the hidden net, and accompanied by their loyal hunting dog, the pair headed to the Shin. John sunk his side of the net while waiting for Ian to reach the other bank. But with the mist surrounding him, the man could not see his companion. "I'm here," came the call from Ian eventually, and John cast over the weighted line. It took Ian some time to find the line as he pushed his way through the closing mist. He sunk his side of the net and called to John, telling him that everything was good. With the river now spanned by the net, all the pair had to do was wait for it to fill. The night grew colder and colder as the men sat isolated from each other by the heavy mist. Eventually, Ian called over the river, "That's us, John. Time to gang aim." But there was no reply, and to the man's horror, he suddenly heard a great splash of water. "John, you okay?" he cried out in concern. There was a moment of complete silence before a reply was heard.
"I'm fine, Ian. Throw her the rope."
The voice of John sounded odd and almost strained, but Ian put it down to the cold and hurriedly cast the line into the thick mist. He then made his chilling return across the river to the village side, and as Ian climbed the riverbank, he saw that his friend John was standing next to a great pile of fish. He had never seen the net so full. Joyously, Ian ran to his friend and called out, "What a catch!" But as John turned to face him, he could see the man's face was pale and withdrawn. His expression was that of torment, and a ghastly voice spewed forth from his mouth as his form changed to that of a hideous monster.
"It is a good catch indeed."
The blood-soaked claws of the beast wrapped around Ian's body and began to drag him to the water. But suddenly, there was a great bark from the dog, which must have taken the vile creature by surprise, as for an instant his grip loosened, and Ian struggled free and ran for his life back to the village. A Upon waking the next day, the horrifying memories of the previous night came flooding back into his mind. The beast must have killed his friend, and would have killed him too if not for the dog. This was how Ian met the Fuath of the Shin. The villagers say that from that day on, the poacher was always white of face and grey of hair, due to the terror he witnessed, and he would never again return to the Shin to steal its fish. Throughout most of the tales, one thing is consistent, and that is the intelligence of the Fuath. They are cunning and manipulative, as seen in the previous tale. This makes them especially difficult to kill or banish. In the Highlands, it is said that the only method to deal with a Fuath is to give the creature a wide berth, as trying to destroy or trap them would only serve to anger the beast and bring the full power of its hatred upon you. This being said, there were occasions when mere mortals would get the better of this terrible creature. One such tale comes from Sutherland, near the village of Migdal. There, a young man once laid a bet that he could capture the Fuath of Loch Migdal, bind it, and take the beast to the local inn as proof. In preparation for his quest, the man procured a sturdy horse, then borrowed an awl from the local shoemaker and a needle from the tailor. Strangely, this tale does not mention the circumstances around the capture of the Fuath. It only acknowledges that the man was successful, and picks back up as he rides to the inn with the female form of the beast bound to his horse. The Fuath was incredibly fierce, and as the pair reached the river crossing, the beast would buck and thrash violently, trying to secure its freedom. The man decided to pin the beast down by driving the awl and needle into her flesh with considerable force. The creature screamed and called out, "Pierce me with the awl, but keep that hair-like blade out of me." The man took little notice and continued on to the village. Heading up to the inn, he called upon the people to come and see his prize. But as the locals exited the inn, with their lanterns held high, they beheld only the man upon the horse. With closer inspection, the inn-goers saw that the ground and the horse was covered in an odd substance, which they remarked looked like star jelly. It was believed to be the decomposed body of the Fuath, which had died due to the wound inflicted by the needle. It was thought that the Fuath, like many other fey beings, could be harmed with iron. But in this case, I am unsure if that was the reason, as the awl would have been iron as well. It has also been suggested that the light from the lanterns killed the beast, as in some tales, the Fuath is said to detest light and will only appear under the cover of darkness. Due to the seductive and alluring nature of the Fuath, many stories tell of the creature interbreeding with humans and producing powerful offspring. In one tale, it is told that a great chief of the clan Monroe once bred with a Fuath, and that for many generations thereafter, the men of Clan Monroe would be born with webbed feet and long, scaly tails, but each had the strength of 10 regular clansmen. It is claimed that the ferocity in battle of the more modern Clan Monroe warriors could be traced far back to this mixing of bloodlines. What is perhaps far more dangerous and insidious than the half-breeds is a young, pure-blooded Fuath. This larval form is known as a Brolican, which means breastling or young. The Brolican was said to have no physical form, as it had not the power in its young age to take shape. The creature would appear as a dark, cloudy smoke with burning red eyes at its centre. The Brolican was more timid than its adult form, and would tend to hide itself deep in the dark recesses of the Scottish woodland. What makes the Brolican truly terrifying is its ability to possess the form of others. The creature, in its gaseous manner, covets all those that take on physical shape. If given the opportunity, the formless mass will infect any creature of an appropriate size. Unfortunately, for this reason, the prey of the Brolican tends to be children. When possessed, the child will turn a pale grey colour, and its eyes will appear red. Often, such beings will exhibit wild, uncontrollable behaviour. Yet the Brolican cannot stay in one host for long. The sheer intensity of its power will cause the host to wither and die within mere days of possession. Occasionally, during this time, the sinister creature will use the dying host to lure and manipulate the grieving family in order to provide the spirit more prey. There is one very well-known tale of the Brolican that comes from the Scottish Highlands, but I am unsure whether to cover it or not, as it is another retelling of the Odysseus and Polyphemus story from Homer's Odyssey. This type of tale appears in folklore from all around the world, and has actually been covered on this channel a few times already. The tale of the Brolican is almost an exact copy of a story I told when covering the Urisk, and considering that the Urisk is sometimes thought of as a less malevolent subspecies of Fuath, it's possible that they are the same tale, just told by different people. Tales of the Brolican and the Fuath served important roles in traditional Highland culture for many years. The Fuath served as a warning about the dangers of rivers and lakes. Also, they warned of trusting strangers, or sometimes even those you know. There was also an element of conservation within the tales of the Fuath. The destruction of the village's natural resources would always bring the wrath of the dark spirits. This aversion to hunting young animals or spawning fish would be very beneficial for the longevity of the village and its people. The Brolican served much of the same purpose, yet also warned children not to wander off into the dark woods alone. It would seem that some tales of these creatures were used as a misguided explanation for various mental and physical illnesses throughout the past. The wild, near-convulsive behaviour of the possessed certainly seemed to suggest a variety of medical issues. The Fuath have always been fearsome predators that stalk the lands of Scotland. Their wrath and power are only bested by their cunning and cruelty. In this land, it is hard to think of a more wicked and blood-hungry beast. So I leave you with a simple warning. Beware the Fuath, as the beast always hungers. Thank you for listening, and a special thank you to all those who continue to support my work on Patreon. Before I go, I have a final detail on the Fuath and a question for you all. The vast majority of the tales I told in this video, and of those I found while researching, specifically came from Sutherland in the north of Scotland. I would be interested to hear tales of the Fuath from elsewhere if you know of any, or if you could shed any light as to why there are so many Fuath in Sutherland. I wonder if there may be some Norse influence behind this creature, since much of that land was settled by Norwegian Vikings and under the rule of the Orkney Jarl for many years. Perhaps the Fuath may also be a remnant of the ancient Pictish beliefs. But all this is pure speculation on my part, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the subject. Thanks again, and until next time, Slang Java.